What up, Stevie Knickknack?
Stevie Knickknack. What's up, Abba Ganoush? I've been saving that one for my food band titles. Yeah.
I dig it. What are we doing this week? What are we talking about?
Well, let me tell you. You know how we've been wanting a guest?
Yeah.
And you know how we've been wanting to do a show on like the arts in difficult times?
Hell
well,
yeah.
I got a perfect person for us this week. I was talking to my old boss from years ago from Duke University when I was in the presenting program over there, Aaron Greenwald, and he's now the executive director at the University of Iowa of their performing arts, the series that they run there. And he agreed to be on our little podcast.
Hell yeah, dog.
I'm super excited about it. Yeah, man. He's great.
Man.
He's been all over the world.
Well,
He's got a ton of experience. Can't wait to talk to him, man. It's going to be fun.
I can't wait to talk to you. I can't wait to pick his ear about all sorts of questions that I have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need the arts, man. We need them more than ever.
More than ever. Well, so if it's cool with you, that's what we're doing on Thursday, yeah?
I'm in.
Fantastic.
I'm in.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
I'll see you in the studio. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
What is the state of the arts in America today? How can we continue to encourage engagement and accessibility in the arts in a time where funding is being slashed for artists and arts programs?
Today on the show, we're in conversation with special guest Aaron Greenwald. Aaron is the Executive Director of Programming and Engagement at the University of Iowa. Our wide-ranging conversation is centered around the importance of enduring art, the ways in which we engage with it, and how arts patronage and resistance can go hand in hand.
So if you're ready for takeoff,
let's go. All right, welcome, Aaron, to the show. Thanks for being with us today.
yes, thank you.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah. We want to start with just a little bit of biographical information, if you wouldn't mind. We read your bio at the top of the show, but can you take us through your journey just starting out in the arts and your path to becoming a presenter?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the most brief version of the story is that I went to school for theater directing. And at some point at the end of my directing, my directing studies, I encountered I had a thesis project that did not go as well as I would have liked to, and sort of lost my nerve. And I ended up moving to Nashville. I thought I had a set of skills that was maybe not involved in making art, but was involved in supporting art and supporting the making of art. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I moved to Nashville and started working on production on country music videos. And I was a production assistant, and it was at a time when Nashville was not. It was a pretty tight knit film community there. And so I got to kind of work my way up from, production assistant to production coordinator to production manager to producing a couple of videos. And kind of ironically, given where Nashville is now, at the time it was not a super exciting place to be a 20-something-year-old. And so after a couple of years there and actually experiencing real success, I moved back to New York City. Where I'd gone to school and thought, well, I'll work in film production here, so first of all, I had to start on the bottom rung again, which in New York means driving box trucks around Long Island City, picking shit up.
Yeah.
Fun.
And I was like, this is not, this feels dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. So I ended up getting a job with a company that produced festivals. Again, kind of an entry-level job. So I felt like I spent a lot of my 20s sort of starting over in a funny way. I'm repeating this thing again. But that turned out to be a good place to be and got me connected with live events. And that so we produced the first couple New Yorker festivals. We produced the New York Comedy Festival. And various, and a couple of we were production for some festivals in Lower Manhattan, or produced those festivals. So that was a good place to be and to kind of learn. I think some of the a portion of the business or a side of the business that I've been in sort of since then. And then I moved to North Carolina with an ex-girlfriend who's going to business school at Duke, and ended up getting a job running a literary festival for the state of North Carolina, which was run out of Duke University. And like shortly after I got that job, me and this girlfriend split up. And I think it became like kind of clear at that moment that like, oh, this is a time where I need to prove to myself whether this is what I ought to be doing. And my schedule at that time was like, I would come into the office at 8, and I was training for a marathon at the time. I would like go out and run at 5 o'clock, and then I would come back to take a shower at the library, and then come back to the office and work from like 8 till midnight. Like this is 9 months of work or whatever. Essentially, I produced this like massive literary festival with 50 plus authors and many dozens of events, sort of by myself. And I was like, oh, this is interesting and felt like coherent and a good thing to do. And then I was asked to kind of lead a revitalization of the performing arts presenting program at Duke University. So something called Duke Performances. And I mean, that's just the idea of a presenting program at a university is that you bring artists to enhance the lives of the students, the community, the faculty. It's often multidisciplinary. It's often multi-genre. There's often engagement with non-commercial art forms, classical music, jazz, dance, theater. And then there's interaction built in between the artists and the students and sometimes the community.
So that would be like class visits and
Master
talks,
workshops,
interviews, chats. Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, I think you can get more or less inventive with that stuff. Hopefully we got pretty inventive. At the time, Duke and Durham had a pretty tumultuous relationship. So the town and the university probably is still tumultuous, but we didn't have like a kind of principal venue to use. So we made a lot of projects both in the community. We made projects both in the community and on campus. Sort of a roaming kind of presenter, which just I think opened up the community to the program and also allowed us to just do different kinds of work because we had different kinds of spaces that we were accessing.
Yeah, when I was working for Aaron at Duke, I thought that was one of the most exciting things because we had so many off-campus venues that were nightclubs that we would rent for the night, or anything, and it really started to bring the Durham community into more Duke Performances events. I think the people who regularly went to those clubs, and I think it was a real special part of what you ran there. Yeah,
I can imagine that draws like more community vibes in, like more different people from who wouldn't, if it was one central location, wouldn't exactly know to go to one place if it's in their own neighborhood or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm sure that brought other people in that grows the community.
I think it did. I mean, in some ways, I have less insight into the community building aspect of it, although I think that that's real. Just like really sort of from a purely the perspective of trying to put on the best show with the most interesting stuff. There are just some that. So first of all, I think like density at live performance is always like super important. So I think like seeing a show at a half-filled venue, for the most part, does not feel especially compelling. So, and then you identify a room that is so say you want to present social music or music that people dance to, right? And that could be American old time music, or it could be African music, or it could be Caribbean music, or whatever. Um, it's better if you can present that music at a spot where people can actually get up and dance.
Yeah.
As opposed,
You're talking to two social dancers here,
Right.
Lindy Hoppers. Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and we actually did some, Paul was there when we were doing some of that work where it was actually specifically for dancers, but yeah, I mean, even just, just like you always do some damage to certain music that wants folks to move to it if they are in fact fixed to a seat that they purchased.
Yeah, it always drove me nuts when somebody would be like, "Hey, the Count Basie band," and it's all seated. Right? And it's like, okay,
it just
great.
feels like, it feels static.
A missed opportunity.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, there's always some economics to that, but so we tried to, but I think we used warehouse spaces, and so anyway, that was always fun. And an interesting way to work and to engage with different kinds of artists. I like to say, I think at the time, that like we think that everybody we bring is important and is doing vital work. Maybe that's the criteria, and that they all have different size audiences, and that doesn't the size of audience they have does not dictate or it's not even really a strong indication of the quality of their work.
Right. Right.
And then I went to after that I went to a festival called Big Ears, which is a really amazing music festival in Knoxville, Tennessee. I think one of the great music festivals in America.
My neighbors of ours who are a little bit older than my husband and I, around the corner, my neighbor Steve loves that festival. He goes every year, and he's past 3 years he's tried to get us to come along with him. So he loves it.
It's an amazing festival. I mean,
that's what he says.
One of the great music festivals in this country, and it's so the basic setup is it takes place at 16 or 18, I think at this point, indoor venues within like a mile walking radius in downtown Knoxville, Tennessee, ranging from like 2,800 seats to probably 200 seats.
Cool.
They're large standing room venues, large seated venues, sacred spaces. And then it's these kind of overlapping, what I would call niche genres. So jazz, avant-garde, experimental, certain kinds of international music, indie rock. And so it's like it kind of creates this, and the audience, probably 70% is coming from out of town. So it's like this kind of portable community that has decided that this one weekend a year that they're going to go and listen and engage with as much music as they can. I think also it's an interesting festival because it's like it's sold like a festival, so you buy a pass, which means that people's like they've already. The risk is just their time at the festival. It's not. They're not committing money to a specific show that might or might not be amazing. So they're like, yeah, I'll go see a couple sets of Bill Frisell, and then I'll go see Meredith Monk, and then I'll see Damon Locks, and then I'll go see however that calculation works out. But it's a kind of magic trick of a festival. A really beautiful contraption. I think it's extremely well communicated and has been well booked from the beginning. And I hit.
How long were you there doing that, Aaron?
Well, I arrived Super Bowl Sunday of 2020, and so we, about a month after I got there, we canceled the festival that was going to happen at the end of March of 2020, and we spent a couple of years in kind of pandemic mode, doing. Streaming programming, which we recorded, doing some site-specific programming, and then I sort of was there when the festival relaunched in 2022, and left, probably 6 or 8 months after that.
Got it.
And then came here to the University of Iowa, Iowa City and Hampshire Auditorium, where I run programming, and it's a it's not dissimilar from the project you and I were working on at Duke, Paul. I think that the arts is way more central to the life of this institution.
Yeah, we would really run into that at Duke, where we would basically give away tickets to the students, and they wouldn't come to shows no matter how great it was or how cheap it was, because it's a law and medicine school. It's not centered around the arts. And
Right.
Iowa, as you told me, Aaron, has a bigger arts program. Is that right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think first of all, it's a state school, and secondly, it admits, I think nearly 80% of the students who apply. So it's accessible. I think that tuition, this is not room and board, but tuition for in-state is less than $10,000 a year, which is a grand bargain in higher education these days. I think as a result, and there's a school of music and a school of dance, a school of music and a department of dance and a department of theater arts, and this kind of radical writing campus that includes the kind of famed Iowa Writers Workshop, an equally famed at this point nonfiction writing program, a very robust undergraduate writing program, a book arts program, translation, an MFA in translation. And then I think the other element that's interesting about Iowa is that it's the home of the Master of Fine Arts. So it's the first place it's the first place in the world that gave a master's degree for creative for a body of creative work.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
That's really cool.
So I think that arts are part of the DNA of the place. I think it's the question is, can you have a broadly accessible institution as opposed to an elite institution that is exceptional?
Yeah.
Right? So we're trying to prove that in the arts, and I think it's going well. I think also like institutions like Iowa, big land grant institutions or big public institutions are all worried about what they call the admissions cliff. So they're worried that as population, a college age population decreases, which is going to happen because of lower birth rates, so they're just going to be fewer kids going to college, and that there will be winners and losers in that at that moment. And I think Iowa is trying to in that calculus, Iowa is trying to distinguish itself as a destination for the arts.
Got it.
And for
cool, man.
Students.
Well, thank you for that. I want to take you back just a little bit further, Aaron. Can you tell us, you grew up in sort of an arts-based household in some way, or at least art appreciators for that matter. Is that what is that what gave you your bent toward going into the arts?
I grew up in the Bay Area, and I guess when I was in like a conscious human being, I was probably in the late 80s, early 90s. And both my parents went to school at San Francisco State in the late 60s. So we're very much part of the kind of counterculture movement that was centered in the Bay Area at the time, which obviously had a lot of intersection with art and culture.
Yep.
Grew up with a big record collection of jazz and folk and classical music. But my mother, pretty early on when I expressed some interest, she loved to go and see things in the Bay Area. And it was a time in the Bay Area where it was easy to have dinner at home and then drive to Berkeley or drive to San Francisco, which I think due to traffic you probably can't do anymore.
Yeah, it's not so easy now.
Yeah.
But we would go and see 3 or 4 things. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but I feel like we're going to see 2 or 3 things a week. It was a pretty
That's
constant
awesome.
agenda of classical music, dance, theater. It's just we also I think back. I don't think we ever walked into a bookstore I think the rule was if we walked into a bookstore, we could buy a book, you know.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
I love that.
And so, you know, and I remember Paul, you probably have memories of this as well, like going to Tower Records in the city and being like,
100%. Yeah.
you know, like having that being a real highlight cultural experience. So really, yeah, a very, very rich. I mean, I sometimes say that like by the time I got to college, I'd seen more stuff than most people have seen in their whole lives. I don't. That's probably true. Yeah, we
Yeah.
just saw we saw so much. I saw so much stuff, like so much dance, so much theater, so much music. Um,
Probably also a lot of public art because the Bay Area
yeah, I
seems
mean a
red
lot of
with that.
visual art for sure. I mean, I remember a early experience like Bobby McFerrin at the old Museum of Modern Art, the old one that was in
The old one. Yeah.
that was you know in the downtown complex, performing in front of the paintings, like for an audience of 30 people or something like that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You know, I got to see like Dizzy Gillespie many times when I was younger, Sonny Rollins many, you know, like so it was a
Nice.
kind of really a constant kind of
Exposure.
yeah, I mean, I think I realized in retrospect that my mother is a little obsessive compulsive, you know, and like so interestingly, like in retirement, she's constantly traveling, and I'm like, well, so where are you now? And she's like, oh, well, I just got an email from her that's like, we're gonna be taking this, a pilgrimage walk. She's not on pilgrimage, but she's taking the walk that folks on pilgrimage would take in Portugal. And I was like, I literally had no idea that they were taking this trip, but it's a constant. Like she was just in Costa Rica, it's sort of a constant barrage of that stuff. So that was good for me.
Yeah, that got you to do a lot of shows.
Really
Yeah.
into it.
Cool.
And I got to like puzzle through a bunch of I didn't have a moment where I was like, oh, this isn't cool. I was like, oh, this is like, I better figure this. I better like, this stuff is all a puzzle. Like this stuff is all, performance of a certain level. It's like, I don't get to say it's interesting. I have to say like what I like about it, what I don't like about it, what I'm getting from it. And so that's all, I've been an audience member for a long, long time. And partly because I was going to see things with my mother, as opposed to like with my pals, like I was going to see adult performance from the time I was like 10.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's an interesting tack to take, Aaron. Do you think that, how did you engage with things that were challenging? Because I see a lot of young people certainly, who are more than willing to give up on something and just say, I don't like it, and to the side. How were you different like that? Yeah, obviously you saw the whole thing as a puzzle. Like it's not, I just need to figure this thing out. How did you get to that place? Was it because your mother provided context for you in there, or were you kind of left alone to engage with the art yourself? Like, how did you get to the place where you're like, I can engage with this. Let me try to figure it out. Let me try to figure out what the artist is saying here.
Yeah. I don't know exactly why. I mean, I have an 8-year-old now, and because I present stuff, like a lot of stuff, I'm constantly saying I'll constantly take her to things, and it's like, and the criteria is not, is it a kid's? The only criteria is like, is it inappropriate for her? Like, is the content inappropriate for her?
Right.
And if it's not, and it's not like torturously long, I feel like she ought to sit there and figure it out. I mean, I feel like we spend so much time saying like, oh, I don't like that, or I don't like jazz, or I don't like classical music, which is like,
it's such a broad thing to say.
It's like it's silly,
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think I was probably an unusual kid. I don't know that I was an exceptional kid, but I think I was unusual. I like to read a lot. I was not an only child, but I was a first child, and in many ways, like I was sort of the third adult in our family.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, but yeah, I've always been, yeah, really curious, and you know, when there was that moment that every young person encounters, where it's like, I'm gonna distinguish myself by knowing more about this thing, whether it's, you know, ska or punk or
Mm-hmm.
folk or indie rock or whatever. Like I was the kid that was curious about all those things.
I got to say that I love that you bring your daughter, and that the criteria is if it's appropriate or not. I was exposed to a lot of things as a child that weren't necessarily for children, but my parents thought to let
And
her
that was
figure
just
it
in your
out.
family.
Yeah, right. Good point. No, but I have a lot of friends with children, and sometimes I think it's like parents can kind of fall into the rhythm of children's content, and not really expose them to things that are a little bit broader, and let the kids kind of make the connections themselves. I just think that's so cool that you're exposing your daughter to so much.
Oh,
I'm curious of how she's going to turn out and how that's going to impact her later in life.
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess we'll find out, right? I mean, I should this also, to be fair, like my opportunity cost on that is really, really, really low.
Yeah,
True.
right. Yeah.
You know, so
Well,
so I feel like,
there's a question I have for you, because I think a lot about this. I grew up right outside of Philadelphia. I live right outside of Philadelphia, and the arts are pretty big
yeah,
here. And there's tons of public art there. We have so many murals. Like, I grew up exposed in that way. But I also know that there are plenty of places where the artists are seen as like the privileged kind of community, the people who have the money to be able to seek out their craft, rather than being like the starving artist archetype.
uh-huh.
What do you have any I don't want to say advice, but like, what's your view about like getting more people to engage with arts, that might not be as exposed to it due to money, or due to where they are in the
So
world?
are you asking about seeing things, or are you asking about
Seeing,
being?
experiencing,
Okay.
and just so it can encourage people to like kind of dive into their own kind of creative juices. I feel like there's a lot of people who see a separation between artists and themselves, and where I tend to think that everyone is an artist. It's just tapping into how you create and how your brain kind of but I'm curious what your take is on that.
So it's yeah. So you're sort of asking me about accessibility in the
Hmm.
arts, and I mean, so I so so I think that, you know, art should be broadly accessible. I
Hmm.
think that um, it also costs money to make,
Hmm.
and even an organization like the one I work for, where many things are broadly accessible, there are certain things that on our season that are very popular and that are costly.
Hmm.
Um, and I can also say that, like, historically, when we've across my whole career, when I've given away tickets for things, people are less likely to come.
Mm.
So, and much less likely to come. So I guess there's this, like, the stuff costs something, and I you know I Paul, and you and I chatted about this a little bit, and before the interview, but like, I don't know how you create a community of folks who are curious and are willing to invest some amount of money in performance.
Hmm. Hmm.
It feels like that. I don't know. So it feels like that's like a constant challenge, is having
Hmm.
people uh, feel comfortable and feel like they're getting something from performance. and maybe I'm like I might be a terrible person to answer that question because it was,
Sorry.
well, I just got so much of it as a
Mhm.
kid, and
Yeah.
it was not. There was no question that it was important, and there was no question that you ought to pay for it. Um, I mean, interestingly, my wife is she's a fundraiser,
Mhm.
and um, we obviously deal at all the places I've worked with donors and people who support arts organizations. But interestingly, growing up, that was not like ever part of. We certainly went to a lot of places that had donors and had, but that was not ever like part of the arts experience that my. It was not like the class of we were not the donor class,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
um, like my mother she believed in buying tickets for things,
Mhm.
and she was
Yeah,
always like,
supporting.
I'm going to get the mid-price ticket, it's never the most expensive ticket or maybe the cheapest ticket. Um, but she just believed that you should buy it and go. And I mean, I think the challenge is that you only do that if you've seen value in your life from that.
Yeah.
You don't just buy a ticket for a piano recital if you've never seen a piano recital, I don't think, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, I think that that would be rare. Um, so, I mean, we're probably like, as a nation, like, probably like falling down in a kind of pathetic way when it comes to arts education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think we've that led me to a question I had on the list, which is, do you think we've overvalued STEM in this country and
So,
sort of undervalued art in education?
I mean, we've probably generally undervalued education.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
And um, so it's interesting. Like Iowa City has really like a very robust music program in schools. Like they have, um, there's orchestras in the middle schools and elementary schools, and then in the high schools there's like choirs and orchestras and bands,
Hmm.
and robust facilities and substantial staff. Um, the same is for visual arts.
Hmm.
Maybe less support, but decent support for theater as well. I think that's super unusual. And in fact,
Yeah.
we lived in Durham at the same time, Paul. I don't think that existed in Durham. I mean, it did not
In
exist in
high
Durham.
schools, you mean?
Yeah, I don't think it existed in high schools. I mean, we spent time at the School of the Arts there, and it was pretty not super impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
can I
At the high.
share that?
Yeah. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to share that, like, it's somewhat related to this, that the University of the Arts here in Philadelphia, as well as PAFA has um, stopped its master's program in the arts, and University of Arts just shut down, and they've been around
Yeah,
since the 1800s.
yeah,
And so you have like as I don't know if it's directly related to like all of the, not all of, but so much of the STEM being the what's the word I'm looking for, like the
The
golden
emphasis.
child,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
of education, that these arts programs are that have been around for so long are kind of dissolving. And I think it has to do with a lot of people who are not don't see a way to create, make money eventually from their art programs. It's really just like it really, for so many people here in the Philadelphia area, it was just like so disheartening to see that these two very respected institutions, start to, I don't want to say dissolve, but and how do you come out of that,
yeah.
especially in a city that really, this city really loves the arts. So
Right. I mean, you want. I mean, it is also possible that places are mismanaged.
mismanaging, of course.
I mean,
Yep. Hmm.
that happens all the time. But I think as a I mean, I've lived in a couple different places at this point, and I think that communities have to really make an effort to have arts in their schools.
Yes.
And if
Hmm.
they are I think that's really hard. I think that's probably really hard to manage in big school districts. Um, um, but that's, you know, I mean, that's going to be the gateway. Um, and it takes resources, and it takes people, and it takes a community supporting it, and it takes a lot. And my sense is that has dissipated substantially across the country.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like we when we present a symphony orchestra here, we'll give every student who's playing in a symphony orchestra in high school in the area, free tickets to the concert. But most places I've worked, you couldn't even identify the orchestra to give them free tickets, So I don't. Yeah, I think it's a real. I think that we can't expect people to love art, whether that's, and especially complex art, not pop art, but like if they don't have any experience with it.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna walk into a Sonny Rollins show and be like, "I get it."
Yeah, I mean, it's super rare, right? So like, how does that happen for folks? That they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm really into this." Even, yeah, I'm, It's like I present a lot of piano recital. Like, I really like. I think it's the weirdest thing. I think it's like kind of miraculous that someone can play that, can master that repertoire, but it does occur to me when I go to piano recitals, I'm like, this is so much information. And if I don't have any experience with this information, like even the most accomplished, gorgeous interpreter is gonna, even if I'm encountering the most accomplished, gorgeous interpreter of the music, like I'm just not gonna know how to make sense of it, so I think that those are challenges, and it's better if you can build some foundation early on, so that when people encounter the complexity of contemporary art, or the complexity of art presented in a kind of unadulterated way, they have tools to figure it out,
Yeah.
Literacy of it.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your style of presenting too. I love it that in one of your bios it says willfully eclectic. That's one of my favorite things about you as a presenter to begin with. Like when we were working together, like the inventiveness of the season, I'm not blowing smoke here either, but the inventiveness of the seasons that you programmed when we were at Duke, and like the risks that you took and how you blended that with more popular things. I feel like you did do a great service to try to bring people in through the more popular stuff, maybe the indie rock and things like that. And maybe those people then cross over and come to see Simona Dinerstein do a piano risk. Well, probably not her, but a slightly more challenging show, and then the community work that you did while you were there too, as well as the outreach on campus to students we brought Thomas Matfumo to a world politics class, right? And some of those folks came and saw his show, and I think you did a lot of work in that direction in terms of bringing people in who maybe didn't have the context as kids from their parents to understand what they were seeing, or maybe they didn't go at all. And just wanted to mention that. I thought you did a great job there, Aaron. I think you're doing the thing you're saying you're not doing.
No, it's nice of you to say. I mean, in some ways, I'm passionate and interested in lots of kinds of art, and maybe I have the benefit of like actually having not spent that much time thinking or engaging with popular art, if that makes sense. Like I just don't. I have lots of blind spots when it comes to that. So while I'm really curious and have spent a lot of time listening and watching stuff, like it actually just hasn't. Not much of it has been popular stuff. Because in some ways that stuff is much easier to master because the marketplace is always telling you about it.
Right.
So, but I like it all. I program things that I like, and I think with rare exceptions. I mean, rarely do I put on a show in the really hundreds of shows that I've put on, maybe thousands of shows, where I'm like, oh, that was really schlocky, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it happens sometimes, but
Yeah.
so I'm not an elitist, I don't think, and but I'm interested in good stuff. I'm interested in people who are communicating authentically. I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested in artists that have like terrific integrity. Um, I'm curious about artists over the kind of broader arc of their career. Um, so yeah, I mean, I believe in a kind of willful presentation of stuff. I'm not willfully eclectic presentation of stuff. I'm not sure. I mean, I think that some people are like followers and are like, yeah, I want to see everything. I want to run across the gamut. I think some people are like, I just want to see the jazz, or I just want to see the international music.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I like it all, and I think that if you're a presenter on a university campus in a university town, I mean, I think that universities are culture changing institutions, and
I
that you should be committed to a broad range of things. Hopefully, there's a thread that connects the stuff, so it's not totally um, oblique.
Yeah.
are there any particular artists right now that are grabbing you?
Sure. I mean, we just worked with a choreographer and dancer named Shamel Pitts,
Okay.
who danced for a long time with the Israeli company Batsheva.
Mm-hmm.
He's from Brooklyn originally, and then started his own company rather called Tribe, and just won a MacArthur Prize. Who I think is one of the really, unique creators out there. Um, we're working with a composer named Jessie Montgomery right now, who's our sort of composer in residence. So she'll make 3 visits to the University of Iowa over the course of the year. She won a Grammy Award last year, and
Nice.
she was composer in residence with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. I think she's terrific and really um, compelling. I mean, there's lots and lots of them, really.
I'm already going to be looking those two up.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
So thank you.
but yeah, no, I mean, we uh, earlier this year presented singer Julia Bullock, the soprano, who I think is so like enormously compelling. I mean, we this year worked with the Iowa-born guy named Steve Schick, who I think is like the leading contemporary percussionist in the world,
Ooh,
and
Cool.
excellent.
it was amazing to work with him. So I'm like, so actually, the great thing about my job is that not only do I get to spend time with people and like, or not only do I get to put on a show that I want to see, but for the most part, I get to spend time with people who I think whose work I think is really enduring and has a lot of
Right.
integrity. Um, and that's a real privilege. Uh,
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
you know, so that's like the best. That's the best part of this work. Um, uh,
Aaron, do you have a show that you've done in your career where you're just like that kind of tops them all, where you're just like this was something you programmed where you're like this was just amazing?
I mean,
I'm just curious because you programmed, like you said, thousands of
yeah.
shows, man. So I mean, it's apples and oranges sometimes. But is there one thing that stands out, maybe?
I mean, sometimes people remind me. Like someone was just sending an email, and like so, um, so another really wonderful artist is the drummer Brian Blade, and who's I think one of the leading drummers in jazz, as well as a band leader sometimes. And um, Brian's father is the pastor of First Baptist Church in Shreveport, Louisiana, and has been for about 50 years. And it's a church of I think probably I want to say it's like between 500 and 1,000 families. It's a big church,
Mm-hmm.
and Brian is kind of very slender and um, maybe my height. And his father's like a giant of a man, like 6'4", and is a great
In every respect, that dude
Yeah,
is
and
like
it's
he commands the
super
space.
commanding. So he's
Yeah.
and he's a great gospel singer.
Mhm.
And so, like, long story short, when Brian was growing up, his family had a show on public access television called the Hallelujah Train. This was in Shreveport, Louisiana, which was kind of a preaching and music show. And Brian like wanted to recreate that experience, that musical experience of making music with his family. His brother Brady is also a top tier drummer, more in the rock and roll world. He's played a bunch with Robert Plant.
No.
And so we so like long, and then the other thing here is that Brian is like very good friends with the producer and musician Daniel Lanois, who produced a bunch of U2's huge records and others. And and Daniel is also obsessed with Brian's father, and so somehow like I got wind of all this, and I was like, hey, why don't we give you guys some money to commission a record from you, and essentially have you make live recordings for an audience at this old AME church in Durham, North Carolina, that had been turned into a kind of African American cultural center. So we brought this project, the Hallelujah Train, which had like 10 top shelf musicians, and then Pastor Brady Blade as the singer, and then the whole choir from First Baptist in Shreveport bust up for the show. So there were like a 34 voice choir, and mostly just like playing incredible roots, what would now be called like roots gospel music. And interestingly, like 10 years after we did that project, like last year, the record came out.
Yeah.
Wow.
There was a lot of
Where can I get
contention
my
over
hands
it.
on that
Yeah.
record?
Yeah.
It's called the Hallelujah Train. It's really
I'm looking that up.
amazing.
And Daniel Lanois was there as producer on the date, right?
Well, Daniel, yeah, he was producing, but he was also playing guitar. He's kind of
Yeah.
famous, and it was like, and Buddy Miller, the Nashville songwriter and producer, was playing guitar on it. Both Brian and Brady Blade Jr. were playing drums, so double drum sets. It was just an amazing. It was kind of like often with those things now, like now that I've done a number of those things, I think that when they work, they're kind of a magic trick, you know?
Yeah.
I was just about to say it sounds like magic.
It's just
So
Well,
yeah,
and
the energy
yeah, and
just
I've
aligned
done
in
enough
some
of
way.
those things where like it all kind of comes together, and you're like,
Mhm.
holy Moses, like
Yeah.
that's it. Like nobody has ever seen this shit before, you know?
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. For me, that was the most incredible show too. I'm glad that you mentioned that, Aaron. And what you didn't mention though was that Hayti Heritage Center was right next to the railroad track. So we had a train
wow.
schedule, right? So you can hear the train. I don't know. Can you hear it on the record? I haven't heard the record.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, probably. But there was a certain time they would come by, and I believe that Brian got hip. Everybody got hip to that and timed something in the show for when the
That's
train came
so
by.
cool.
Yeah, it was really
It feels
cool.
like that only would add to the ambience of the
Totally.
energy.
I mean, I mean, multiple chills during that show for me. Like it just almost all night long. It was just an
really
incredible
cool.
experience, and like everybody in the room felt that show, and it was just an amazing project that Aaron put together.
That's
So
so
yeah,
cool.
I would agree. That's one of my favorites too. Yeah.
I'm a bit envious.
How about things that you've seen as an audience member, Aaron? Do you have a favorite thing that you've seen as an audience member? Say like from music.
There's a project that the pianist Jeremy Dank and the violinist Stefan Jakiv did, which was Charles Ives of violin sonatas.
Okay.
And Jeremy had like hired a quartet, an all male quartet, to sort of sing, to kind of tease out the tunes that Charles Ives was, the sort of source material that Charles Ives was working from.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that like music is pretty magical. I mean, I also like I remember seeing like the great Malian guitarist Ali Farkatore and his last show at Town Hall in New York. And somehow I was with someone, we were able to snag, third row seats or something like that.
Wow.
That was yeah, that was a real highlight. Yeah, I mean, I remember, I remember my brother and I we got wind that there were rodeos that happened in rural North Carolina, Mexican rodeos, and they often had banda groups that were playing behind them. So one like beautiful summer afternoon in North Carolina, we went out to one of these, and it was like so much better than I could have ever imagined.
Really?
So there's like imagine 3/4 around a bull ring, and bull riding ring, and then the back of the ring there's a stage with a band on it. So the band is like literally like people are betting on the riders. They're like crossing themselves a million times and getting on these bulls. There's betting happening. People are like, there are families. There's drinking. It's this incredible night in the middle of nowhere in rural North Carolina, and then there are these like terrific, banda groups like playing while people are bull riding, and I was like, well, this is,
That's amazing.
That sounds great.
I feel like if Riot Fest in Chicago doesn't adopt this kind of
Well,
they're really missing
I mean,
out.
I always thought I have often thought about doing it.
You should.
but
Yeah, man.
And invite me.
I just can't imagine what the liability insurance would look like.
Yeah, right.
Good point. Everyone's
Absolutely.
Um,
Little trigger inside the university
first
presenting
thing.
system.
First rule of this is no one talks about Fight Club.
Right. No one talks about Rodeo Club.
Exactly.
well, they're funny because it's sort of like you don't find out about them. Like they're not in your local alt weekly,
Right.
Yeah, of course.
Right. You
Yeah.
got to know someone, right?
You gotta
You
know.
just got to go to the Mexican grocery and be like, that. I'm going to go to that.
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
The funny thing about it
Amazing.
was, I think that when we went out there, it's like double if you pay double the price if you buy tickets there than if you buy it at your local store.
Your market,
You had no anyway.
Right.
All I can envision in my head is if like one of my friends from like Berlin or like, from Europe came over and I took them to something like this in the States, that they would be like,
They were
their head
probably,
would explode.
I mean,
Yeah.
so in some ways I have so much experience like watching and managing things that it's got to be a little off the wall to really be
stick.
like, oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
a totally different experience,
Banda
You kinda shot
rodeos.
yourself in the foot there, Aaron.
Yeah.
But I mean,
when you're exposed to so much good stuff, it's
I'm easily moved by things, and also I think I'm fairly discriminating. The other thing I'll say is that like I almost have no idea what something is unless I see it live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a really good statement there.
It is.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. We're coming up on the end of the hour, Aaron. We don't want to keep you because we know you're busy, but this podcast is called If We Only Knew Then. And so would you have anything to say now to your younger self? It could be concerning your career or your life or anything like that. It doesn't matter. But if you knew what you know now, then, and you can pick any age, what would the advice be to your younger self?
I feel like I'm a terrible person to answer this question.
Well, I'm sure the first thing that sprung to mind is I should have given Paul more raises. But after that, there must be more regrets.
Well, I'm not sure how much control I had over that, Paul, but
No, I'm only kidding, man.
I don't know. I don't have a lot of regrets. I mean, I've done things that were unwise in my career, and in some ways, I wish I had those. I wish I had made different choices. But
Mm.
But
Well, and that could be really helpful to the audience too. The reason we ask that question is so, we can have some collective wisdom around people who are thinking about going into these kind of careers, So if you had anything in your
well, I mean,
career that you regretted, where it's like,
so the thing I will say is, and I've actually had a bunch of conversations recently here at Iowa with students about this, which is that I have not ever been like when I moved to Nashville, I worked at Tower Records, right?
Mhm.
And started PAing on music videos, and like that meant coiling cable all day, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When I moved back to New York, as I told you, I drove box trucks around Long Island City or blocked off a dead intersection at Brooklyn Navy Yard in the middle of the night. Um, when I moved to Durham, I was temping there before I got a job running this festival. So while I have had some financial cushion, and I'll be like some support from my parents along the way, who are not who who were generous. They're not absurdly wealthy people, but they were helpful along the way. They did not feel like, you know, the support ends here. You've graduated from college, the support ends here. Um, they helped me along the way, especially when things were could be rough. When I left Duke, I didn't have the next thing. So all I'll say is like sometimes so long as you don't like lose your integrity or lose your hope that the next thing is, or your faith in yourself that you're good enough for the next thing, um, you can work through a lot of um, situations that maybe feel like they're below your station.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important in those times to find nourishment, and you have to know what nourishment is for you. For me, it's pretty easy. It's like good music, reading the New Yorker or a good book, um, uh, exercising, eating well. Um, so I have a lot of faith, and I have a lot of confidence and a lot of faith in myself and what I do. Um, but part of that is also like I think I have a terrific ability to work through what other people would find debilitating situations.
Mm.
I love that answer. That was
Grit.
the perfect answer to that, right, Nora? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So
Very
Yeah.
good.
that's just like, I mean, probably for those reasons, like I'm a annoying person in lots of other ways, or a difficult person to work alongside in other ways in certain instances, but I'm a little bit of a grinder, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I just like believe in that as a value, and my
Mhm.
and I'm sort of like physical, I'm kind of built for it in terms of my attention. I'm built for it in terms of my like stamina, whatever. Just like those, that's just who I like working a long day. I like routine. I like, um
When you first said that you were marathon training and then like working until midnight, I've run 3 marathons and I understand what that means for marathon training.
Yeah.
So I'm like, damn.
I mean, I only ran one,
You
but
got
I was a
grit.
distance runner in high school, and
Mhm.
and I'm also like a really like maybe a sort of a slow worker. I think I've realized. So like
Mhm.
for
Mm.
me, if I'm in the office at 8 o'clock and done at 5 o'clock, like my wife will do way more work in like 3 or 4 hours of time than I might do in that however long a span of time that is. But I know that I need that quantity of time to think through and work
Yep.
through um, the stuff.
Yeah.
And so I know I have to put in that time if I'm going to be successful. If I put in half that time, I will get half the work done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's cool.
Man, well, Nora, is there anything else you want to ask before we let Aaron go?
Well, I just was going to say in an era where we're seeing so much funding being cut from arts programs and and just I believe, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, that the funding and the support for the arts is crucial now, more than I don't know about ever, but in recent times. do you have any words for people who are in the arts and are worried, that of encouragement, or for people who want to support, but outside of like buying tickets for stuff, is there anything else that people can do to kind of support and create a sustainable culture where artists are supported?
Yeah. So what I would say is that people need to recognize when I was talking about like sustenance or what you need, like you need enduring art, right? Like
Hmm.
you like to be outraged by the daily political cycle. I think it's good to be informed. I think
Hmm.
it's not healthy, and
It's not sustainable.
it's not sustainable. It does not
Hmm.
nourish you.
Yep.
It does not. It will not help you arrive at creative solutions for how to live your life and how to resist if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So you know, if people's form of resistance was to like redouble the quantity of enduring art they take in, that would be a remarkable form of resistance in this country.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, I like that.
um, I just feel like, I mean, I know over the last 3 or 4 months, like that people need the stuff that 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 we're offering.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that's the nourishment.
it's the nourishment.
Yeah.
It is the
Yeah.
nourishment right now,
Yeah.
and what we're
Agree.
starving for.
And I think that artists, funding or not, artists will make work.
Yeah.
Because artists have to make work, right?
Yep.
And that's a necessity for them.
Yeah, for sure.
And we have to be tough. We have to be like not just. We have to be tough emotionally too, because this is this is a barrage, and it's like it feels like it's sort of intended to be a barrage.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I think those are things that I would say. Um, you know, yeah, I think that the challenge is getting out and doing more.
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
So
Thank you for that very
I mean,
beautiful answer.
Yeah.
it's beneficial to my livelihood too, but
Well, it's all.
Yeah,
I
of
mean, I think
course.
it's beneficial for all our livelihoods,
All of
whether we
our
realize it or
all of
not.
our lives. Yeah.
And
Great.
that's something that I have been struggling with this era.
I will also say, like, and maybe this goes back to the thing we were talking about at the beginning, that generally things that are unfamiliar and that test boundaries are less costly to attend
Mhm.
than things that are
Yeah.
Yeah.
familiar and are maybe a little more tepid in their aesthetic. And
Yeah.
so you might find that while tickets to see your favorite rock band are unaffordable, that to go and see a choir, a professional choir, is in fact imminently affordable and might
Yep.
end up being more of a more impactful
Mhm.
in the long run.
And
Yeah.
just adding on the back of that, there's also things like ticketed dress rehearsals. My mom used to take me to ticketed dress rehearsals of Ailey all the time. We couldn't afford Ailey tickets when I was a kid because we didn't have any money. But they would make the effort to drive me over there and go to these free ticketed dress rehearsals, which was really cool because I got to see the company take direction as well and
Yeah.
things like that. That really demystified the process for me when I was a kid. I still remember those dress rehearsals like they were
That's
yesterday.
cool.
So
Well, yeah, I think
Yeah,
that
it's great.
I think it's all. I think that the opportunities are all around, and just
yeah.
take
Mhm.
they take a little more hunting, and they're not advertised as well because they're generating less income.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah, of
and
course.
you just have to make friends with someone who's hip to what's going on and just be like,
Yeah.
"What are you going to
For
do?"
sure, for sure, for sure,
Yeah.
and yeah, have friends that you can trust who are
The tastemakers.
yeah, who are leading healthy lives when it comes to that stuff. So you have
The
to
maybes. Yeah.
go with your neighbors to big ears.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. That's
It's not
funny.
off the table.
Yeah. All right, Aaron. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
joining us
you.
today. I know you have such a busy schedule, and it's so kind of you to take time and be on the podcast today. So thanks,
Yeah,
and
we
it's
really
good to
appreciate it.
and it's good to see you again, man.
Chat.
Yeah.
Thanks for the time, guys. Thanks for doing
Yeah, hang
the
in there
show
too.
and
All right.
building community out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Freedom over cycle stays the same.
If you'd like to get in touch with us about anything you've heard on the show, please feel free to drop us an email at ifweonlyknewthenpod@gmail.com.